They thought he was stealing. Before Marcus could even say a word, a hand grabbed his wrist, firm and sudden, the kind of grip that doesn't ask questions first. The watch was still in his hand, not hidden, not taken, just being looked at under the store lights. But in that moment, none of that seemed to matter. "Sir, put it down," the voice came sharp, controlled, already assuming the worst. Heads turned. Not slowly. Immediately. Marcus didn't pull his hand away. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't react the way they expected him to. He just looked at the man holding his wrist, then at the watch still resting in his fingers, then back at the faces now watching him like the situation had already been decided. "I asked to see it," Marcus said calmly. But the words didn't land the way they should have. Because the story had already been written in their heads. The sales associate who had been smiling just minutes ago was now standing a few steps back, her expression completely different, guarded, tense. Like the moment had shifted into something dangerous without anything actually happening. "He picked it up," she said quickly. Marcus turned his head slightly. "You handed it to me," he replied. Silence hit for half a second. Then the security guard tightened his grip just a little more. "Let's not make this complicated," he said. Marcus exhaled slowly, not out of frustration, but out of clarity, because now everything was obvious. This wasn't about the watch anymore. It wasn't about what actually happened. It was about what they thought happened the moment they looked at him. Across the store, another customer was laughing while trying on a watch, an associate adjusting it on his wrist with careful attention, smiling, explaining details, no tension, no suspicion. No interruption. Same store. Same products. Different reality. Marcus slowly placed the watch back onto the display tray, his movements controlled, deliberate, making sure there was no confusion about what he was doing. "There," he said quietly. The guard didn't let go immediately. Because letting go would mean admitting something wasn't right about the situation. And that part always takes longer. "I'm a customer," Marcus added. No anger. No raised voice. Just truth. The manager appeared almost instantly, like he had been watching from a distance, waiting for the moment to step in. His eyes moved quickly from Marcus, to the guard, to the watch, to the associate, piecing together a situation that should have never escalated this far. "What's going on?" he asked. The associate spoke first. "We thought," but she stopped. Because now it sounded different out loud. Marcus didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. Because the moment was already exposing itself. "I asked to see the watch," Marcus said calmly. That's all. The manager looked at the guard. Let him go. The grip loosened. Then released slowly. Like it shouldn't have been there in the first place. The room didn't go silent, but it changed. Conversations softened. Movements slowed. Awareness filled the space where assumption had just been. The manager stepped closer, picking up the same watch and holding it carefully before offering it back to Marcus, this time with both hands, like something had to be corrected. "Here," he said. "Please." Marcus looked at it. Then at him. Then back at the watch. For a second, he didn't move. Not because he didn't want it, but because the moment had already said everything. "This didn't start like this," Marcus said. The manager nodded slowly. "No," he admitted. Marcus finally took the watch again, but this time the weight felt different, not because of the price, not because of the design, but because of everything that had just happened around it. He looked at it briefly, then placed it back down. "I'll think about it," he said. And this time, nobody stopped him. Nobody questioned him. Nobody grabbed his wrist. Because suddenly, everything was clear. Marcus turned and walked toward the door, the same path he had walked in with, but a completely different experience attached to it now. As he stepped outside, the city noise replaced the controlled quiet of the store, cars passing, people moving, life continuing without interruption. But one thing stayed with him. It wasn't the watch. It wasn't the store. It was how fast everything changed the moment they decided who he was. And once you see that happen in real time, you don't forget it. Marcus didn't rush away from the store. He stepped out onto the sidewalk and paused just long enough for the door behind him to close, the reflection in the glass briefly showing the same scene that had just unfolded inside, only now it looked distant, almost unreal, like something that had already been decided and then undone too late. The street was alive in the way it always was, people moving past without hesitation, conversations blending into the background, cars rolling by in a steady rhythm that didn't stop for moments like the one he had just experienced. He adjusted his sleeves slightly, more out of habit than need, and started walking. His pace was steady, not fast, not slow, just controlled, the same way he had handled everything inside. But his mind was sharper now, not clouded, not emotional. Just aware in a way that didn't fade easily. Across the street, a cafe door opened and a couple stepped out laughing, holding cups in their hands, their interaction easy, unforced, untouched by anything complicated. Marcus glanced at them for a second, then looked ahead again, his thoughts settling into something quieter but more precise. It wasn't about comparing himself to them, it was about recognizing how simple things could be when nothing interrupted the process. He reached the corner and stopped at the crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. A man next to him scrolled through his phone, barely aware of anything else, while a woman adjusted her bag. Shifting her weight from one foot to the other, the moment felt normal, ordinary. But Marcus could still feel the difference sitting just beneath that surface. The light turned green and he stepped forward, moving with the flow of people crossing the street. Halfway across, he glanced back without fully turning his head, just enough to see the store again. The same glass doors, the same clean design, the same place that had shifted so quickly from calm to tension and back again. On the other side, he kept walking, eventually slowing near a row of parked cars. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, hesitating for a moment before making a call. "Hey," he said when the line connected. "You free for a minute?" He listened, then gave a small nod. "Yeah, I just left that place I told you about," he continued. Something happened. He didn't rush through the explanation. He spoke calmly, clearly, laying out exactly what had happened without exaggeration, without raising his voice, just facts, details, moments that spoke for themselves. On the other end, there was a pause, then a response that carried a tone of familiarity, like this wasn't the first time a story like this had been heard. "I figured," the voice said. Marcus let out a quiet breath. "Yeah," he replied. "It's just how fast it happened." He ended the call a minute later and slipped the phone back into his pocket, standing there for a second before continuing on. The conversation hadn't changed what happened, but it confirmed something that didn't need much explanation anymore. Later that afternoon, Marcus found himself sitting in his car, parked just a short distance from the same store. Not directly in front of it, not close enough to draw attention, but near enough to see the entrance clearly. He wasn't there to cause a scene or to confront anyone. He was there because sometimes understanding something fully required seeing it more than once. He watched as customers walked in and out, the doors opening smoothly, interactions beginning and ending without interruption. A man entered, greeted immediately by a sales associate, his body language relaxed, the interaction starting with ease. A few minutes later, a woman stepped inside, and the same thing happened. A quick smile, a welcoming tone, no hesitation. Marcus observed quietly, not judging, not reacting, just noticing. After a while, he started the car and drove away, the store shrinking in the rearview mirror until it disappeared completely. The city opened up again around him, traffic lights changing, people crossing, everything moving in patterns that felt predictable. He drove for a while, without a specific destination, just letting the road carry him, the steady motion giving him space to think without pressure. What stayed with him wasn't the confrontation itself, it was the clarity of it. The way a simple request had turned into something else entirely before it had a chance to be understood properly. Eventually, he pulled into a quiet parking lot near a small park. The late afternoon light stretched across the grass, people sitting on benches, some walking their dogs. Others just enjoying the moment, Marcus stepped out of the car and walked slowly along the path. His hands relaxed at his sides, his posture easy. The calmness of the park contrasted sharply with the tension from earlier, not because it erased it, but because it showed how different environments could feel when nothing interfered with them. A child ran past him laughing, chased by a parent who was trying to keep up, their energy light and burdened. Marcus sat down on a bench and leaned back slightly, looking out across the open space. For a few minutes, he didn't think about the store at all. He just sat there, letting the quiet settle around him, letting the moment be what it was without attaching anything extra to it. But the awareness didn't disappear. It didn't need to, because once something becomes clear, it doesn't fade just because the environment changes. Marcus stood up after a while and walked back to his car, the sun beginning to lower now. Casting a softer light across everything, he got in, started the engine, and drove home. The familiar streets guiding him without effort. When he finally pulled into his driveway, the day felt complete in a way that wasn't about resolution, but about understanding. He stepped inside, placed his keys on the table, and moved through the space with the same calm presence he had carried all day. He sat down for a moment, not out of exhaustion, but out of reflection, his thoughts settling into something simple. The situation hadn't been complicated. It had only been made complicated. And the difference between those two things was where everything happened. Marcus leaned back slightly, his gaze steady, his expression unchanged. Because at the end of it all, one thing stayed clear. It wasn't about the watch. It wasn't about the store. It was about how quickly a moment can shift before anything real is even known. And once you've seen that happen, not imagined it, not assumed it, but actually experienced it, you carry that understanding with you. Not loudly, not aggressively, but clearly. And that clarity changes how you walk into the next moment, long before anything even begins. Marcus didn't move right away after sitting there. The quiet of his home felt steady, almost protective, like a space where nothing needed to be explained or justified. The events of the day had already settled into something clear in his mind, not chaotic. Not overwhelming, just defined in a way that didn't need to be replayed over and over again. He stood up slowly and walked toward the window, resting his hand lightly against the frame as he looked outside. The street was calm now, the kind of calm that comes at the end of a long day, when everything begins to slow down and people return to their own spaces. A car passed by, headlights cutting briefly through the dim light before disappearing again. Marcus watched it for a moment, then let out a quiet breath. It would have been easy to let anger take over. It would have been easy to react in the moment, to raise his voice, to match the tension with something louder. But he hadn't. And that mattered. Because the way the situation revealed itself said more than any reaction ever could. He turned away from the window and walked back into the room, his steps unhurried, his posture relaxed. The day was over, but the understanding it left behind wasn't something that ended with it. It stayed. Not as something heavy, but as something precise. Something real. Marcus sat down again, his hands resting calmly in front of him, his thoughts quiet but complete. The system hadn't failed. It had worked exactly the way it was allowed to. And that was the part that stayed with him the most. Because it wasn't always about something being broken. Sometimes it was about something being overlooked, ignored, assumed. And once that line is crossed, even for a moment, everything after it starts from a place that was never equal to begin with. Marcus leaned back slightly, his gaze steady, his expression calm. He knew one thing for certain now. He didn't need to prove anything. He didn't need to argue. He didn't need to fight for recognition in every room he walked into, because the truth had already shown itself without him forcing it. And that kind of truth doesn't disappear. It just waits. Waiting for the next moment. The next interaction. The next decision someone makes before they really know. Marcus closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again, a quiet clarity settling in deeper than before. Tomorrow would come. Another place. Another situation. Another moment where everything could go either way. But now, he would walk into it differently. Not with doubt. Not with hesitation. But with awareness. Because once you've seen how fast people decide who you are, you stop walking in blindly, and you start walking in knowing that the difference isn't always visible at first. But it's always there, and when it shows itself again, you won't be surprised, you'll just recognize it and keep moving forward anyway.